Now the latest ITV News in London.
Tonight, fearing for their loved ones. As Afghans race to escape their country, families here are left frantically trying to reach relatives who are now living under Taliban rule.
And the Taliban are inside the house and searching for them. So they're really dangerous, and she's feeling really unsafe.
And the dramatic fall of Kabul was being watched by other families, those who lost loved ones in the war in Afghanistan. Also on the programme, 4 people remain in hospital after a Saturday night party ends in a shooting. The celebrity dancing duo's fire safety warning after a social media challenge goes horribly wrong. And Brentford flying high on their return to top-flight football, winning fans on and off the pitch. Good evening. The images of desperate people trying to leave Afghanistan have shocked the world. Here in London, thousands have added reason to be concerned as they worry for family and friends who have woken up under Taliban rule. The chaos of the last few days mean many are struggling to even find out what has happened to their loved ones. Others know all too well their relatives are being hunted for the work they do. We've been speaking to some of those Afghan Londoners powerless to help but consumed by fear. Our political correspondent Simon Harris has the latest.
They might be thousands of miles from danger, but these are frightened people. At a community centre in Feltham, Afghans living in London were desperate for news of their families. The chaos in Kabul and other cities makes it difficult to get accurate information, but some have made contact. Idris, not his real name, called his sister, who's fled her home and is now in hiding.
They had to go and somewhere like in a location that no one knows where they are, and she's really afraid if they know where they are, because at the moment the Taliban are inside the house and searching for them.
For those who have got through, it is a familiar story.
The Taliban now, since they have the control over the city, searching house by house. If they found anyone who were working as a translator or as a journalist or who were working in the media or in the civil society, they will target them, they will kill them.
Arifa has spent 3 days glued to the TV, fearing for her family. She was a child when the Taliban last ruled Afghanistan, but 14 years ago she escaped to begin a new life in London.
It makes me feel so upset that how 20 years development, investment in women education, capacity building, a civil society, everything is just suddenly left it behind. I was like having flashback, and I was feeling every single minute that what I experienced that time as a child, how scary for me, that I was scared that I would be forced in a forced marriage, Taliban would take me forcefully from my family.
The television pictures from Kabul are chilling. People desperate to get on a plane mobbed this American transport aircraft as it tried to take off. The withdrawal of Western forces has left some MPs here questioning the operation.
What we've seen is a rush to the door in order to make a 20-year anniversary deadline and good PR. Well, look what's happening now. It's absolute chaos. And it's yet another error in a long series of errors when it comes to Afghanistan.
On Wednesday, MPs will return to Parliament for an emergency debate on the crisis. Simon Harris, ITV News.
For other families here, pain of a different kind this weekend, seeing the agony of seeing the country their children died or were scarred by returning to Taliban rule, as if the last 20 years of sacrifice didn't happen. Lieutenant Mark Everson was a platoon commander in Helmand province. He was shot leading his men to safety. He died at the age of 26. Today, his mum told us she'd only just got used to Mark not being here, and seeing the footage from Afghanistan has brought the raw pain back. Carolyn Sim reports.
Her son died 12 years ago and Margaret Everson had slowly been finding a way to live without him. Mark was 26, a lieutenant with the 1st Battalion, the Welsh Guards, killed by the Taliban in Helmand province. But news that militants have again taken over the country has had a profound effect.
Although I thought that I was quite well sorted about it, it has actually hit me quite hard and upset me quite a lot.
To the drama in
I think the reality that
you're watching STV this
not only was Mark's death sort of in vain in a way, but also the pain and suffering of other mothers and also all the Afghans.
At the time Mark was in Afghanistan, questions were being asked about how well equipped the British soldiers were and whether they should have been there at all. It was a concern Mark had logged in his personal diary.
It's really interesting. He said, "I seem to be the only one here who believes that war might not be the answer to this particular problem. We must work on our relationships with the Afghans if we are going to build a future for them." My son died, and I know the impact on me. And if a country from outside, a Muslim country from outside, had come in and, behaved in the way that we behaved in Afghanistan, I wouldn't have been very impressed. The one major mistake they've made is believing that there was a military solution to this problem. And that's why it's all fallen apart.
Soon after his death, Mark's family set up a foundation in his name, helping thousands of young people in London to achieve their dreams.
They've all walked away feeling more confident and having enriched CVs, Newscaster forms, and it's really a great little charity. In a way, it doesn't balance Mark's death, but it makes the very bitter pill just a little bit easier.
Margaret now wants the government to hold a public inquiry into the 20-year conflict and to apologise for what went wrong, so that Mark's loss wasn't completely in vain. Carolyn Sim, ITV News.
And there will be plenty more from Afghanistan on the ITV News at 6:30 with Charlene. But next, a party in Camden that began in a communal gardens on Saturday afternoon and ended in a shooting is believed to be gang-related, the Met has confirmed today. 4 people remain in hospital. A woman who works in the area with young people linked with gangs has spoken to us anonymously about her concerns and how she believes it could have been prevented. She's been speaking to Ria Chatterjee.
Someone is stretchered from the scene. It's Saturday night on Clarence Square Gardens in Camden. This morning, we come across council workers sent to wash blood from the pavement. These moments become part of a neighbourhood's history, and they create fear. A woman who works in the area with gang-affiliated young people has spoken to us anonymously.
Suddenly you hear the screeching tyres, a car's pulled up, and it was the gunshots, approximately 5, and then the music stops, screaming, running. I've run because I've seen other people run.
4 people are in hospital after a group of up to 5 men showed up to a party here and opened fire. This woman showed me social media screen grabs from that night, which seemed to show
people were inviting their ops there.
So to just explain what ops is.
Enemies, opposition, people, another gang in Camden that they don't get along with.
Incidents like this really have a traumatic impact on the community.
Yeah. We literally phoned all day since it started around 1 p.m. and we weren't given any reassurance, It could have been avoided.
What makes you feel so upset about it?
Because we were ignored.
A 19-year-old and 17-year-old are in hospital, both women, a 28-year-old man and a 73-year-old woman who came out onto her balcony, residents say, to tell people to quieten down. The police say their conditions aren't life-threatening. The leader of Camden Council visited the area yesterday to listen to people, and today we saw so-called council presence officers walking around the estate. The council say their security team were called to respond to noise complaints from a party on Saturday and that they were in regular contact with the police.
And you say tensions were high. How would you measure that? How could you tell?
just the behaviours of these young people, that throwing things around, you know, it wasn't a small group of people, it's a really big group of people, and it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger as the day went out. Loads of speeding around the estate in people's cars, and they weren't familiar faces.
The police say a full review is underway of the initial police response prior to the shooting. They say any learning will be acted upon and shared with the community. But for now, it's witnesses the police need to hear from. Ria Chatterjee, ITV News.
The neighbour of a pensioner found stabbed to death in Notting Hill has been charged with her murder. 76-year-old Bella Nicandrew was found inside a property in St Luke's Road on Saturday evening. Aaron Cook, who is 23, has been charged with her murder. To the pandemic now, and businesses around the capital have expressed relief as the government continued with the next step of the roadmap out of lockdown. From today, if you come into contact with someone who has COVID-19, you won't have to isolate if you've had your second vaccination at least 14 days ago, or if you're under 18. Instead, you are advised to take a PCR test as soon as possible, but won't have to isolate while waiting for the result. But you will have to isolate if you have a positive test result, regardless of age or vaccination status. So it is an end to the so-called pingdemic, but a concerning step for those who have been shielding, as Sam Holder has been finding out.
Food prep begins early morning at Bocca di Lupo restaurant in Soho. From filleting fish to getting peppers properly charred. There are dozens of steps that need to be done hours before any customer steps through the door. So last-minute cancellations are a real problem. Currently, they're happening 4 times more often than pre-pandemic. Contact tracing, the most common reason. Until today, staff here had been split into 2 teams, never entering the building at the same time. The risk of everyone being traced was too high. So the end of self-isolation for the double-jabbed is doubly good news.
I couldn't stop people from being contact traced. I can't tell them not to live outside of work, and they are in an environment where they will be in close proximity to other people. It feels like a big step closer to stability and a big step closer to getting out of this mess as a business.
The move has also got 5-star reviews from London's theatre owners. Until now, putting on big, expensive shows was too much of a risk, because if any cast member tested positive, everyone would have to self-isolate and the curtains would come down on the whole production.
It's significant because it reduces the threat of being closed down, and that means that we can start to get the industry back on its feet again. There's still a way to go for the whole country, but this is a very good day.
The change means that, let's say you're in a theatre and somebody next to you or in front of you or behind you tests positive, then so long as you're double jabbed or under 18, you do not need to self-isolate. And if you're identified as a close contact or pinged by the app, then you're advised to get a PCR test, although that isn't a legal requirement. Those who are vulnerable, like John, who has MS, are urging people to remain vigilant.
The problem with a lot of these directions is they're guidelines. They're not strict orders like we had a few months ago. We owe it to ourselves, we owe it to other people to be extremely careful.
67% of Londoners have been fully vaccinated, about 8% less than the national average. But for industries where every empty seat eats into profit, the end of self-isolation for the double-jabbed is a major milestone. Sam Holder, ITV News.
And if you want a reminder of all the changes taking place today, you can find them on our website, itv.com/London. But for some small businesses in the capital, not even the further easing of lockdown can ease their concerns for the future. For those relying on tourism or even just general footfall, survival hangs in the balance, as Rags Martel has been finding out.
So how empty is it compared to normal?
Oh, it's very empty. Compared to normal, you'd have people queuing, you'd have thousands of people sitting on the steps.
St Paul's should be packed, but at times there seems more pigeons than people.
It's actually quite eerie, to be honest with you, especially for August. It's not something that you just wouldn't see St Paul's this quiet.
Henrietta Ferguson runs a tour operating business, but after the lockdowns, tourism is still effectively locked out.
There's no clarity on the rules. The government keeps changing the rules. Nobody really knows what's going on. Can they come here? It's so messy and so confusing that people are just going elsewhere. They're just not coming to the UK.
And like many tour guides, she hasn't been able to work since March last year.
Summer is normally the high season for tourism. Are you worried about the winter ahead when you've had such a terrible summer?
Yeah, we've had 2 terrible summers. So I feel like we're still in lockdown. So even though the country is reopening, until the government help us bring back international tourists to our cities, I just don't know if we're going to survive.
The Phoenix Arts Club in the West End has been able to reopen, but numbers are drastically down.
We're not back to normal, no. Only 1/3 of our shows are open, and obviously because of the various pandemics and whatnot, which hopefully we are over now, you know, the theatres are really struggling to sell their seats.
And here it's not just a drop in tourism that's the problem, but a fall in confidence too.
We just don't feel like people are coming back to the West End for the same reasons that they did pre-pandemic, which was to come and see live theatre.
And how painful is that for you as a business?
Oh, financially it's crippling.
And can you continue like this?
No, not for the long term.
In terms of business confidence, a report shows London is lagging behind the rest of the country.
Confidence is still in the negative numbers at -1 on this report, and that's lagging behind the rest of the UK. What small businesses need is for a reduction in the cost of doing business in the capital. I mean, we need to avoid any extra employment taxes.
But more dark clouds remain. Next month sees the end of furlough, a scheme supporting many businesses in the capital. Mike Martell, ITV News.
Still to come, we'll have the weather, plus fairy tale starts and very full hearts as Brentford make a cracking return to top-flight football. But first, the dancer Abby Quinnan has joined a campaign with the London Fire Brigade after being seriously burned while trying to make a vase at home. She and her boyfriend, the Strictly star AJ Pritchard, were following a life hack video online which involved setting fire to a rope to make the vase. It's been viewed millions of times, but for Abby it was nearly fatal. Well, Abby joins me now, along with firefighter Tiana Ann Pearce. Hello to you both. Abby, first of all, just tell us what happened.
Unfortunately, I was in a horrific accident where I incurred burns 1st, 2nd and 3rd degree, and we thought it was a simple craft tutorial, but we was so wrong. I was stood maybe 2 meters away from AJ when he lit the piece of rope, and the flame just exploded and I was engulfed in flames. It caught my hair, caught my clothes. I was kind of rolling on the floor to try and get the fire out. That didn't really work. I got a blanket and I managed to pat myself down, and that managed to get the flames out. I then went to ICU and stayed in Chelsea and Westminster Hospital for 5 days. I then had 3 operations and still continue to go for laser therapy and also regular therapy now.
Abby, we're going to show a picture of your injuries in just a moment, but what's remarkable about this is it all just came from doing something fun, wanting to make a vase that you'd seen online.
Exactly. We thought it was just a simple craft tutorial. Everyone was trying life hacks. It was during lockdown, so we just wanted to try something fun and what everyone, I think, was trying to do during lockdown. But for me, unfortunately, it went horribly wrong and I'm still paying the prices from it, like today.
Tiana Ann, let me come to you then. Are you seeing more of injuries like this because of people trying to copy things online?
Yes, we are seeing an increase in these kinds of incidents occurring. We did have over 315 fires last year that involved people misusing electrical appliances, and that is through trying to replicate life hack videos that they are watching online, which is extremely worrying.
I mean, be specific. What exactly are you seeing when you talk about electrical appliances?
So toasters, I've seen a lot of videos where people have tried to cook meat in a toaster. Toasters only have one use, and that is toasting bread. And you shouldn't be putting meat in a toaster at all, because you get the fat from the meat that stored in the bottom of the toaster, and over time it can become faulty and cause fires. So trying to use appliances for other uses than they're specifically designed for can create faults and lead to fires. So it can be extremely dangerous, not only to yourself, but those around you.
I suppose a lot of us might just think, this is common sense. But Abby, I guess if you see something's been seen lots of times and it looks fun, you just want to have a go. What's your message?
Absolutely. I think I would definitely suggest not trying these life hacks if they look maybe dangerous. I think a lot of the time also the videos are so edited that's only a small part of the whole experience of trying the video. So I feel like a lot of it is actually cut out, and maybe watch the videos and don't reciprocate them.
Abby, thank you so much for sharing your story, and Tiana Ran for your fire brigade perspective as well. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, in just over a week, we'll be marvelling at the athletes competing in the Paralympics. But for many people with disabilities, some of the greatest challenges aren't in the pool or on the track. They're just trying to navigate everyday life back here. That's because despite some progress on disabled access, campaigners say much more needs to be done. When it comes to trains and stations around London, they believe there is an opportunity now to make travelling easier for all. Martin Stew has been finding out more.
To get from central London to Walthamstow, most people would jump on the tube without thinking.
Hello.
Jeff Harvey doesn't have the luxury of spontaneity.
I need a ramp to get on.
He's had to research station access and realised a broken lift means he'd have to get off at Finchley and then take 2 buses for the other half of the journey. Instead, he's taking the train. But even that requires help and a longer wait.
So there's no way we can get on that one?
Just not enough time to get the ramp out.
Can you move it to the left a bit?
15 minutes later, he was on the next train.
Thank you.
Jeff's been using a chair for 30 years. He's seen things improve, but believes there's still a long way to go.
Well, a lot more stations are accessible to the platform, but there is a lack of level boarding, so there has to be assistance. And that assistance is a gamble, with each step of the way, whether there's going to be somebody at the station to meet or ready to get me on the train.
But it's not just wheelchair users who need barriers removed.
Thank you.
Former Paralympian Andy Barrow is chairing a brand new accessibility panel to make sure the railway is welcoming to all.
We're looking beyond just disability, the traditional realm of, a wheelchair user or a visually impaired person. We're looking at every young mum with a buggy. We're looking at, and we have an ageing population. We're looking at elderly people. If you need help, we should be there to give you that help. It's just being human at the end of the day, I think.
Arriving at London Bridge, there are plenty of trained staff, lifts and information touchpoints, which can even provide signed messaging for the deaf. It's the gold standard this Paralympian wants to see across the board.
But London Bridge is just one of 368 railway stations in and around London. Many of them were built in the Victorian era, and almost all of them need to improve their accessibility.
The government say all stations are now being audited, and hundreds will get extra disability parking and more textured paving to help people navigate.
This is independence for a very large group in society, and people who do travel to work and have been key workers throughout this time. There's a massive group that I want to get back on our railways.
Yeah, I can see the person with the ramp now.
Passenger numbers are still well down on pre-pandemic levels. With plans to bring train companies back under centralised control, campaigners like Jeff believe this is a moment of opportunity to make train travel a level playing field once and for all.
Thank you.
Martin Stew, ITV News.
On to the weather, and it's not bad, but it's not great either. Here's Helen Plintz now with the forecast for the next few days.
Making the most of it, whatever the weather. Octopus Energy sponsors ITV London weekday weather.
Hello again, a very good evening to you. Well, it's only the middle of August and already it feels like summer's on the way out. A real mishmash this week with anything but warmth. Generally, though, the theme towards something cooler and cloudier, but that does leave the room for dampness at times, brightness at others, although this will be in relatively short supply. But high pressure to the west, low pressure to the east, the reverse really of what we'd want for sparkling summer sunshine. And between the two, filtering down this northwesterly airflow. So that drags in the moisture from the Atlantic, bringing the extra cloud our way and rain at times. Mostly light and drizzly for the time being, though, so nothing too dramatic. And actually, as tonight wears on, a lot of clearance overhead. This does, though, allow temperatures to drop down, so especially on the outskirts of the region, again, a little bit nippier first thing tomorrow morning. But some brightness for the very early birds. Quickly, though, look at that. The cloud rolls in from the north and the west, also accompanied by outbreaks of rain. Again, fairly patchy in nature, not sticking around too long, but certainly noticeable through the day, and a fairly drab, dreary afternoon then following. Still a bit on the breezy side, so where we find any shelter and sunshine, it's not going to feel too bad, but the likelihood of that is fairly limited, with that brightness never really staying. 20, 21 degrees, the high generally through the day tomorrow. And as I say, those clouds really sticking around for the bulk of us. A very similar flavour then as we start to approach Wednesday, but by Thursday, or something more in the way of prolonged rain starting to head in. So you can take a look at our temperatures. By then, we're comfortably in towards the 20s as we head towards the end of the week. A little bit more humid, but very unsettled.
Octopus Energy sponsors ITV London weekday weather.
It was a fairy tale start for Brentford in the Premier League opener on Friday night. Their first game in top-flight football for 74 years, ending with a convincing 2-0 win over Arsenal. The players took a well-deserved lap of honour to celebrate with a full crowd of ecstatic fans, including 8-year-old Woody O'Rourke, who got his own special moment with the manager and his team. Anton Allen reports.
A really special season for Brentford.
If you waited 74 years to see your team back at the top, you might cry too. On Friday, Brentford beat Arsenal and won their first Premier League game. The joy Brentford's manager shared with a young fan and his mother is an example of the community spirit that this club was built on. Woody, how did you feel on Friday?
It was good. You love Thomas, don't you? Yes.
The joy Brentford's manager shared with a young fan and his mother is an example of a local team that stays connected with their loyal fans.
The magical thing about it was that Thomas seemed genuinely happy to see Woody in the crowd and sort of ran when he saw Woody. And they just shared that moment of, yes, we did it. You know, like I said, Woody can't talk, but they didn't need any words between them.
8-year-old Woody has Down syndrome. This means he's non-verbal. But since his mother took him to his first Brentford game, the universal language of football has given him a voice.
Are you going tonight? Yes.
How's it made you feel that Brentford have made your son a part of the Bees family?
It doesn't matter that he doesn't speak because everybody's talking the same language, which is football, and that they want Brentford to win. So, and the fact that they've just been so inclusive with us is just massive, and it's literally been life-changing for him.
When Brentford needed to announce their first ever Premier League goal, on social media, Woody was chosen as the fan to express their joy to the world. Their second goal sealed their victory against Arsenal. By the final whistle, Brentford's manager knew his team had given their fans the return to English top-flight football that they had been dreaming of for decades.
Fairy tale start.
You know, we just opened the Premier League season worldwide. We just beaten Arsenal, one of the biggest clubs ever. Fair and square, 2-0, and we're top of the league. What's not to like?
Brentford's stay at the top of the Premier League was short-lived. They are now 6th in the table, but their fans will hope the style in which they won their first Premier League game will mean their place in England's top league is long-lasting. Anton Allen, ITV News.
And another footballing dream came true this weekend when one little boy got to have a kickabout with his Chelsea heroes. 6-year-old Tony Hudgell, who we've met many times before, went to the Blues training ground yesterday and got to meet his idols. The double amputee passed the ball around with Mason Mount, as well as posing for photos with the rest of the team. And that is it for now. I'll be back with the latest after news at 10. Coming up, Charlene with the ITV Evening News. But from me and the rest of the London team, thank you for watching and bye-bye.